Hi there, and welcome to the exercise feedback video for section 4. In this video, I'll be going through the answers to the exercises for section 4, which is looking at the interpersonal functions of language. Okay, so in this first exercise, you just need to identify all of the verbal groups in the sentences. And then you need to decide which of those verbal groups are non-finite. By the way, if you haven't downloaded the PDF and tried this exercise first, please do that right now. If you're watching this on a platform like Udemy or some other kind of online course platform, there'll be a resources section where you can get this file. And if you're watching this on YouTube or a video streaming platform, there will be a link in the description. I'm just scrolling down to get the answer. Okay, here it is. In this first sentence, a koala eats about half a kilogram of leaves each day. There's only one verbal group, it's eats. Now, as you remember, a group can be one word, and in this case, it is one word. Eats. This is a finite verb because it has tense and it matches to the subject. So the subject is koala, a koala rather, and the verb is matching that subject, eats with an S. Okay, and the tense is present simple tense. In the next sentence, there are actually two clauses and two verbal groups. The first one is koalas are fussy eaters. And again, are is finite. But the next clause, choosing most of their food, is non-finite. Now, why is choosing non-finite? Because it is the ing form of a verb. And if you remember from the videos, ing, ed, and infinitive with to are all non-finite forms. They don't have a tense. In other words, you can't say koalas choosing most of their food. It doesn't make sense because the verbal group choosing doesn't match with the subject koalas, and also it doesn't tell you tense. Now, the confusing point is that this ing form is often referred to as the present participle. And indeed, I like to call it the present participle, but this can be confusing because there's no present tense in there. In the second example here, okay, often young male koalas will be chased away by older males. The verb group is will be chased, and the finite is will. So that's a finite verbal group. In the next sentence, we have quite a few verbal groups, and the first one, to survive, is non-finite because to verb doesn't have a tense. Must find is a finite verb group. So is not, and so is occupied. Now, another thing that I need to mention, in this clause, it's clearly the past tense. Okay, so just watch out because the past simple and the non-finite past participle form often look the same. In the next example, it begins with a non-finite, to make, And then the next verbal group, must first be specially prepared. That's an interesting one because there's only one verbal group there, must be prepared, but it's got a lot of interrupting adverbials. Between must and be, there's the adverbial first. Between be and prepared, there's specially. So you can see how adverbs can interrupt the verb group. The next two verb forms are non-finite. They are just the ing form, drying and roasting. Now, if this verb group here, drying, were to be finite, you'd need something like is drying or was drying or will be. We don't have it, so it's non-finite and the same as roasting. And in number 4 here, covering an area of 348,000 square kilometers, covering is non-finite, it's just the ing form on its own. So that's obviously a dependent clause right there. And here is the independent clause with the finite verb group is. I'm just going to scroll back to the top now. Okay, exercise 2. In this exercise, you need to identify the subjects and the finites in the text. Okay, so there's one about koalas and there's one about Rapunzel. So, let's go down. Okay, now, before I explain the answers here, subject and finite is just something that you need to understand. It's difficult to practice this area of grammar. It's more like you just need to know what's going on. The most practical application for it is subject and verb agreement, or as I like to call it, subject and finite agreement, because that's really what it is. But more on this in another video perhaps. Starting with the koala's text. In this clause, a koala eats 0.5 kilogram of leaves. The subject is a koala. The finite, or the finite element of the verb group is eats. In this case, the whole verb eats is both the finite and the predicator. In the next sentence, koalas are fussy eaters. Koalas is obviously the subject. The finite element, or the finite verb, is are. Now, the next clause here doesn't have a finite element, so we're just going to ignore that one. The next sentence is around Sydney. That's a circumstance, so we can just ignore that. It's not the subject. Red gums and mahoganies are their most favoured trees. So are is the finite. Red gums and mahoganies is the subject, because that's the participant which is connected to this process or this verbal group here. In a similar way, tallow wood and forest red gum, subject, are is the finite, and finally koala's subject, prefer is the finite. In the Rapunzel text, we have some more examples. Okay, in a there clause, such as there is, there are, there were, and so on, there is the subject. It's an empty kind of subject. It's not really anything, is it? You know, there was a man. But the grammatical function of subject is this one. Were is obviously the finite. Okay. In this one, a splendid garden could be seen. That's a passive clause. The subject is a splendid garden, and the verb group is could be seen. What's the finite element of that verb group? In other words, what is the part of that verb group which connects to the subject? It's this one, could. Could also tells you that if you wanted to make this a negative clause, couldn't be seen, that's where the not would go on this finite element here. The next one, the garden had the most beautiful flowers. That's another example of your regular type of clause with the subject, the garden, and had is the finite. Okay, there's one more thing I wanted to mention. Right here, there's an asterisk. So why did I put an asterisk there? Let's read the sentence. Okay, it was surrounded by a high wall. No one dared to go into it because it belonged to a witch who had great power and was feared by everyone. In this clause, the subject is the pronoun who, which is the witch. Had is the finite. And in this clause, the subject isn't there. Well, we can't see it there, but it's hidden there. It's hiding. This is a special kind of grammar, which I won't go into right now. But what I wanted to tell you was that the subject who is in here. You just can't see it. Okay? And the rest of these examples are pretty straightforward, I think. So I won't explain them just now. Okay, now the third exercise here is a little text about the Great Barrier Reef, and the finite element is missing, and you have to put it in. In each case, the finite is some form of the verb to be. So, is, are, was, were, and so on. Okay, so if we're talking about something that's generally true, let's use the present simple. So the Great Barrier Reef, is or are, well, it's got to be is, because Great Barrier Reef is like an it subject. So the Great Barrier Reef is one of the world's most unique and diverse ecosystems. It is the world's largest coral reef. It is so large. Here we go. This is an interesting one. The amazing collection of coral reefs and islands is visited by almost 1.9 million people every year. Now, why did I write is and not are? Because I know what you're thinking. Maybe you're thinking, oh, look, islands, plural. Also, coral reefs, plural. This should be are. But actually, it isn't. And that's because we need to identify the noun group. That's the noun group there. So what's the thing? What's the main noun in that group? Of course, collection. And collection is singular. So the finite verb is does not match with reefs and islands. It matches with collection. So this is really where knowledge of subject and finite and nominal groups can help you out a lot. Another 1 million people are lucky enough. Okay, so that's obviously a plural subject, people. So we need to make the finite match it. The last one is a past tense finite because we have the clue here in 1981, and that tells us that it's was or were. The subject is a singular subject, the Great Barrier Reef, so the answer is was. So there you go, guys. There is another feedback video for you. I hope it was useful. I hope you've increased your understanding of subject and finite and how they work in a clause and in a sentence. If you're enjoying this content, please leave a review if you're on a platform such as Udemy, because reviews really help to keep this course visible in a search. If you like this course, please leave a review, and if you're watching this on a different platform such as YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and leave a comment down below. I would love to hear from you. Okay guys, that's it. Thanks very much, and I will talk to you again in the next video.